This is Josh Bycer from GameWisdom.com. Hope you enjoy this Critical Thought, your daily discussion on game design. And be sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and you can pitch future Critical Thought topics. Alright everyone, for today's Critical Thought, we're going to be going back, to a topic that I really should have talked about at the start of these. And we're going to be discussing mechanics, systems, and dynamics. For those of you who are game developers or who are working on your own game right now, you can pretty much take the day off from watching me because you pretty much should know this already or have done it. But for consumers, students, and especially enthusiasts interested more about the design process, this kind of thinking is very important in terms of how you're going to start building your game in your head and be able to explain how things work. And I have to give credit to a friend of mine, Corvus Elrod, who gave a little talk at my Philadelphia IGDA chapter, about a decade ago. I mean, maybe a little bit more than that. Man, I feel old again. But when we're talking about mechanics, systems, and dynamics, these are all essentially the building blocks of your game design. We'll start with mechanics. The mechanics are the actual interactions that the player is going to have with your game. Consider this all the adjectives, all the verbs that your game is built on. So running, jumping, shooting, building, flying a spaceship, you name it. Anything that the player does is considered a mechanic. And this is the easy part. I'm sure anyone watching this has probably thought up their game in terms of mechanics. The systems part of things is the collection of all relative mechanics. So when I say platforming would be a system. And then in that system, we can talk about jumping, double jumping, hanging from edges, the run jump, Mario's fireball, anything that can be tied to a single system or a single group of mechanics. And at this point, this is where, again, things are still easy to understand, and it's more about being able to categorize or create that, foundation for what your game will be about. The third part of this, and what we'll probably spend the bulk of today's Critical Thought on, are dynamics. And dynamics are essentially whenever mechanics or different systems combine into something new. And that it can be a little bit trickier to explain. Let's say, for instance, we have a first-person shooter. And in terms of our mechanics, we have, shooting a gun, jumping, stuff like that. One of the guns, let's say when you shoot it, it creates like a little force push. Like every time you shoot it, it pushes the player back, or it creates something that will push anything out forward. Now, these are two mechanics. You have the jumping and you have the gun. But let's say by using this gun in the air, you aim down and you fire, the force pushes you up and effectively creates a double jump. This would be an example of a dynamic. You're taking two mechanics that aren't really related in terms of how they're designed, but still combine them anyway to create something new. Any game that allows for min-maxing or player customization can also be considered these kinds of dynamics, whether it's creating the perfect skill build in Diablo 3, your deck of cards that complement each other in Hearthstone, the right gear in an MMO, anything like that. And the RPG genre is certainly full of these kinds of dynamics due to the abstraction at work. We've seen games that let you combine different skills that play off of each other, such as in the Shin Megami Tensei series, where the systems are designed to reward players who hit enemies at their weak point and punish those when you use a skill that they're strong against. So a dynamic would be combining these two systems to force the player to say, if this guy is strong against fire, maybe I should hit him with a fireball. At larger scale, when we talk about dynamics and how they relate to mechanics and systems, we can look at games that have completely different systems interacting with each other. A famous example would be any game where you have sort of like the action gameplay over here and then the stealth gameplay over here. So stuff like Metal Gear Solid and those action games that throw in like other sneaking or stealth elements. In this case, you have these two systems trying to work together to create something new. Now, typically when systems combine like this, again, when we talk about multi-systems, they usually have different UIs attached to them. So something like XCOM would be another example. You have the tactical layer down here, then you have the base level economic system over here, and then you have the geoscape system over here. And how those three systems interact with each other is where this concept of the dynamics come into play. So with XCOM, the tactical layer, you get the weapons and the resources that let you build stuff in the base layer, and then you can take those equipment, put on your troops, take them down to the tactical layer, or build new weapons or fighter planes or ships for the geoscape level. And this is the part where things get very tricky when it comes to designing your game. Most often, any kind of dynamics that you find are usually developer intended. So another good example of this would be something like from Portal, and the dynamic of creating, like the portal on the wall, portal on the ground, and just keep going through to build your velocity, and then shoot the portal at the right place to essentially create a makeshift cannon to launch your character somewhere else. In this case, we have these different systems or these different mechanics going to play. The physics-based movement, your jumping, and of course the portal, and all that combines into one mastery technique. We can also talk about the idea of breaking video games with dynamics, and this goes back to what we were saying a few minutes ago with min-maxing. Players who find the most optimal builds, the perfect ways of using everything, and then they proceed to just demolish everything in the game. In these cases, the dynamics aren't usually developer focus, but it's still there. And again, whenever you have multiple systems like this or multiple mechanics, it's always possible to find these special or hidden ways of combining them. Speedrunning being another good example, when players figure out little tricks like damage boosting or doing the right kind of jump attack that gets them over a gap they weren't intended to do and skip an entire portion of your game. And this is of course where that challenge comes into play as being a game designer, because you have to be careful with how much freedom you give your player in this regard. If you leave things in that afford them the ability to just completely break your game, then that may not be good if you're trying to build a challenging title. But if everything is so rigid in its approach that the game just plays the same way every time, then it kind of gets boring. Tomorrow's Critical Thought will actually be covering the philosophical side of pacing, or how long a game should really be. But to sort of tie into tomorrow's Critical Thought with that, when it comes to really good uses of mechanics like this, games like Super Mario Galaxy would be a good example. You have all these individual mechanics in terms of your crouch jump, your triple jump, spin jump, all your kinds of jumps, and then the game basically lets you figure out all the ways you can combine them to get Mario around the environment. So a new player may not figure out about using the triple jump all that much, but an expert player will know to do a triple jump, spin jump to try and hit this wall so you can wall jump up and completely bypass a section you would otherwise have to do. And that kind of interesting design really leads into expert level development or game development on the designer's part, when you allow different players or different skill levels to play at the same time. But that is easily another topic in of itself. And I think we're going to wrap things up here. Apparently when I recorded my dissecting design video, there was an issue with the, how it was being streamed or what I set the recorder for, and I lost the first take of it. So I just had to record the whole part of it, and my mouth is dying and my voice is dying as we speak. So let's wrap things up here. So to summarize, Mechanics are the verbs that the player is going to be using in your game. And we can even talk about individual systems like in a strategy game or a turn-based strategy where you have, one system or one mechanic for managing your troops, the other one for your economy over here, and then your tech tree for researching gunpowder or the wheel or anything like that. Systems, of course, are the collection of relative mechanics. And again, this is more about categorizing them. It makes it easier to explain your game's design because you can say my stealth system is built on sound, sight, and the player being able to maybe mask their sound or shoot out lights or crouch down so they're not being as visible and stuff like that. And then the dynamics are the combinations that form from either merging mechanics or merging systems together. And another really good example that I mentioned earlier is, of course, the 4X or grand strategy genre, when you have all these massively complicated systems combining into one experience. So again, your Crusader Kings, Stellaruses, etc. And talking about those games, that is certainly another topic that maybe at some point we can get to. But let's end things here. As always, thank you so much for watching. If you're enjoying these critical thoughts, be sure to like and subscribe and all that great stuff. Be sure to check out our Patreon campaign. You only have a few days left in January, and I'm hoping we can at least hit that first goal soon, because I would love to be able to introduce more PlayStation-related content, especially for some of the older games that we haven't really talked about before. Again, you can find all that on the Patreon site, GW Bycer. There's even a reward up for having someone come on as a co-guest host for a critical thought. More information on the site there. And of course, check back daily here and on GameWisdom.com, where we examine the art and science of games for more great stuff. Like I said, tomorrow I should be having my first dissecting design video up. But until then, have a great night, and I will see you all tomorrow. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoy it, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and of course share with your friends. It always helps out. For daily posts on all manner of game design and industry topics, check out game-wisdom.com. To support the site and everything that I do, be sure to check out the Patreon campaign. If we can hit goals, it will mean more content for everyone to enjoy, and I'll be able to support myself and my household. If you want to follow me, you can find me on Twitter at GWBycer for updates throughout the day and random thoughts from me. And lastly, you can find me on Twitch right over there at GWBycer for daily streams most nights around 10 Eastern. Thanks again for watching the video, and be sure to check out more great content coming to the Game Wisdom channel real soon.